So the police officer started the process of listing what in his mind was right with the world, but after just 2 or 3 minutes, he ran out of anything to say. He couldn't think of anything more that was good about the world that he could share with this man, and so he paused briefly to think about the circumstances in which he found himself, and then he reached over the railing, he took that man by the hand, and the two of them together jumped into the river. Now, of course, that's just a story. But now listen to these fairly recent statistics. Suicide is the second leading cause of death among college students. And it's the third leading cause of death among all young people aged 15 to 24 years old. In fact, in the United States, anyway, only accidents and homicides claim more young lives than suicide. According to another study, more American adults suffer from depression than the combined total of those people who suffer from coronary heart disease, plus cancer, plus AIDS. That more than that combined total is the total number of adults who suffer from depression. And there was a recent, although even more controversial study that even talked about depression among preschoolers of all people. Now that story was just a story, and those statistics are just statistics, but they nevertheless lead to all sorts of questions for us to think about. Questions like, have you ever felt, or do you presently feel, worn out in some way by what you do, burned out by circumstances, stressed out by your work, by your family, by your life? Are you just tired of trying? Are you, in fact, ready to give up? Are you ready to throw in the towel and just quit? Well, if any of those things have been true, if any of those things are true for any of us, then we are especially able to relate to the story of Elijah in today's Old Testament lesson. Elijah was, in fact, a gifted, a strong, a faithful person. And as both the introduction and as the lesson reminded us, he was coming off a tremendous triumph in his life. And yet, here he is, here we find him not out celebrating, but here we find him slumped down under a broom tree with his head in his hands. For you see, King Ahab had married an outsider named Jezebel, and she had imported an army of priests of Baal, and they had become a bad influence on the people of Israel. And so Elijah ended up having a showdown with them, and a showdown between their god Baal and the God of Israel. The God of Israel wins. That seems to be good news. It's a victory for the God of Israel. It's a victory for Elijah. But it is, of course, a defeat for Jezebel, one that she doesn't take well. And so what starts out as a kind of victory lap for Elijah ends up with him disappearing into the wilderness to avoid being captured. Ends up finding him sitting under a broom tree, alone, discouraged, depressed, trying to figure out how things had changed so quickly, trying to figure out how things had gone bad so quickly, wanting these circumstances to be all over. In fact, we're told he felt like he just literally wanted to die. Now, the one thing that this part of the story of Elijah makes very clear is this: there has never been a shortage of broom trees in the world. In fact, when we look around, sometimes it seems like all we see are broom trees that we maybe have sat under at times. Maybe we've sat under them our fair share of times. Maybe we have covered the bark of these broom trees with carvings from our own lives that represent our own problems and our own struggles. Some deep fear that we have, some disease that's chasing after us, some death that's still haunting us, if not confronting us, some depression of our own that we just can't shake, some disappointment, some worry, some hurt that's always there, it seems, nagging at us, bringing us down, putting us under our own broom tree. That's because the fact of the matter is there's never been and there is now no shortage of broom trees, no shortage of reasons for anyone, even for us to sit under them. So, like Elijah, we can and we do become discouraged and tired and confused about things that do or don't happen to us. We can and do reach the point where we silently or maybe even loudly scream out about those things. Scream out that we just can't take one more thing. Have you ever thought that or ever said that? I just can't take one more thing. I just can't handle one more pressure. I just can't live with one more problem, one more disappointment. It's our own way of saying, where's the broom tree for us, we say. It's enough, O Lord, we say. In fact, we say it's more than enough. Take my own life away, we say, perhaps. I've had it. Maybe we at least think, if not say, I wish I was just dead. It's because sometimes we feel just like Elijah felt, which is why the Lord is always ready to give us the same encouragement and the same hope and the same strength that he gave to Elijah. Get up and eat, he said to Elijah. Otherwise, the journey will be too much, even for you. Before the journey, in fact, does even come close to being too much, even for us, we are blessed to discover just what the people discovered in this story. There once was a large hospital that had a persistent nagging problem. It had to do with noise in the infant nursery. One baby would start crying, that would cause another baby to start crying, and another baby to start crying, and soon all the babies in the nursery would be crying, and that would make the sound level in the nursery almost unbearable for the staff, almost unbearable for the newborns. And so they tried all sorts of different things to try and remedy the situation, all sorts of things to try and fix things, but nothing was really helpful. And then someone came up with one particular brainstorm. He said, how about playing a recording of the mother's heartbeat beside each of those babies' beds? And they tried that. And it worked. The sound that the baby had heard even before it was born was the sound that gave it the most comfort after it was born. And so it is for us, no matter what our age. It's because sometimes the struggles and the stresses and the sights of life give us really no choice except for ourselves to curl up under a broom tree. But there is someone who can always give us comfort, and it's the sound of God's heartbeat beside our bed, or beside our desk, or in our own homes, or in our doctor's offices, or in our families, or in our marriages. We may hear that heartbeat in the midst of a hymn, or in the midst of a Bible verse, or we may hear it in a bit of bread or a sip of wine. We may hear that heartbeat in the hug of a friend, or in a note from a friend. But no matter where it is, it's always a reminder of the abiding presence of God. And somehow that reminder is able to give us the faith and the hope and the belief that no matter how tiring or frustrating or depressing the journey may get at times, reminds us that because of that abiding presence of God, we can and we will somehow make it. Sitting there, though, under our broom trees, sometimes we forget that comfort. Sometimes we feel forgotten. Sometimes we feel as if there's nothing to depend on and even less to expect. But when those very times occur, God always gives us exactly what we need. When those times occur, our only real hope is to believe, in fact, that God is here and that God is with us. God will take our hands and will somehow take care of us. When those times occur, God is somehow able to touch us in such a way that we have both the will and the way to live with and to live through anything and everything that life ever throws at us. Of course, we struggle with all kinds of things. But this reminds us that we never struggle alone. Of course, we wrestle with all kinds of things in our families and in our jobs and our lives, but this reminds us that we never wrestle alone. Of course, we find ourselves all the time sitting under some version of a broom tree. This reminds us that even then we don't sit there alone. And somehow, even under a broom tree, somehow that heartbeat, if you will, somehow that presence, somehow that promise, when other things seem committed to just draining the life out of us, somehow that presence is able to give us life. Somehow Jesus is able to give us life exactly when it's needed the most. And when other things are committed to just put us down, somehow Jesus is able to raise us up, as Ephesians tells us, not just on the last day, as important as that is, but somehow Jesus is able to raise us up each and every day. Somehow Jesus is able to raise us up this day and on every day when we are down, when everything it seems around us looks like and feels like darkness. Somehow Jesus is always our light. Somehow Jesus is always the light of the world. So we're blessed to say, bring on those broom trees. Now, of course, we don't look forward to them. Of course, we don't want them. Of course, we would like to avoid them.